Well, we have plenty to discuss yet again this week, and it again includes Ross Chastain as we're going to break down the wreck between him and Kyle Larson, comments that were made post race, and as well as some new comments made by team owner Justin Marks. Also, we're going to go over the weekend's Xfinity and Truck Series races and look ahead to an exciting weekend coming up with All-Star Race Weekend coming from the historic North Wilkesboro Speedway. And it all gets started on this episode of 3 Wide. So before we get started on this week's episode of 3 Wide, let me tell you about our presenting sponsor, Hunt to Harvest. Now, Hunt to Harvest is back with us for our second season here at 3 Wide, and right now, if you head over to hunttoharvest.com, you can check out their new Spring 2023 selection, where they have plenty of design choices for turkey hunting, as well as different types of fishing. Also, they still have that mystery box special going on where you can get 3 shirts chosen at random sent to you for just $33. And with the high quality shirts you're getting at $11 a piece, you can't find that kind of deal anywhere else. So head on over to hunttoharvest.com where you can update or upgrade your hunting apparel. And when you go to checkout, be sure to enter that promo code RADNEY18923. That's RADNEY 18923 to get even more savings at checkout at hunttoharvest.com. So real quick before we get into the heart of this week's episode, there's a couple topics from the Cup race we really want to dive into. But first, looking at the Truck Series race and Xfinity race from Friday night and Saturday. The Truck Series, Christian Eckes, he comes away with the race win, led 82 laps, comes away with 6 playoff points. A solid race for him and one that was much needed because ever since his win at Atlanta earlier in the season, it's been a tough stretch for him. His highest finish in the races since Atlanta is 15th. He finished 15th at Texas Motor Speedway and a 15th place finish at Martinsville. Other than that, it was 3 30th place finishes, one at Coda, Bristol Dirt, and the other at Kansas Speedway. Really, the finishes doesn't show the speed and the finishes he was really lined up for to get at these races. It's honestly just been a stretch of bad luck. Like at Coda, he won the first stage, led a handful of laps. He just had a parts failure late in the running that took him out of that race. At Bristol Dirt, that's always a toss-up. He was involved in a crash there. But last week at Kansas, he won the pole, was just involved in that huge crash there, going into turn 1 on a restart that took out, Chase Purdy and Matt DiBenedetto and several others. But at Darlington, he's able to put it all together. He started 4th and had a good running. Like I said, he's still, I would put up there for a guy to keep an eye on when the playoffs start to be a good championship threat. Also, you had Stuart Friesen finishing 2nd, Tanner Gray 3rd, a good solid run for him as well. Carson Hocevar, he finished in 5th. Rajah Caruth, he comes away with a 6th place finish. And Corey Heim, who led the second most laps with 66, he finishes in 8th. And Corey looked to be the guy, to beat. Had a good, strong running, but some pit strategy got them messed up and kind of ended his chances at winning the race. You also had Caden Honeycutt coming away with a 10th place finish and Dean Thompson with a 9th place finish. This definitely wasn't the best race of the weekend. It ended kind of a anticlimactic way. There was a accident and an overtime restart coming out of turn 4 just after Christian took the white flag. So that ended that race prematurely, but a much needed win, like I said, and running for Christian Eckes. On the Xfinity Series race, you had Kyle Larson win, and what was an exciting finish between him and John Hunter Nemechek. Kyle Larson had to dig his way out of a hole in the last half of the race where he had a speeding penalty on pit road, caught a caution there at the end just right, and was able to make one last charge to the front. He led 46 laps, but the driver that he beat, who led the most laps, John Hunter Nemechek, he finishes in 5th. And this was really a good, hard battle between these guys in the last lap. Larson was able to get the lead on the back straightaway on the last lap, going into 3 and 4. Got a little physical, nothing dirty or anything like that. Just a typical Darlington race ending. John Hunter, he spins off of the bumper of Kyle Larson, hits the inside wall on the front stretch there at pit road, comes back up across the track, hits the outside wall, slides across the start finish line. And what was surprising most was NASCAR did not throw the caution really until the wreck had pretty much been over and you had John Hunter sitting in the middle of the track. So not an ideal situation for John Hunter, not a good heads up call by NASCAR to not throw the caution really when he hit the inside wall, especially, and started coming up across the track. But some solid runnings for some drivers who are Truck Series regulars. Carson Hocevar driving the 77 car. He finishes in sixth, leads a few laps. You have Corey Heim. He finishes in 10th. And the Sam Hunt car, a good running for both those guys that are looking to up their stock in the NASCAR world. Hocevar over the weekend, he's been a controversial figure in the Truck Series world for quite some time. He was spun out in the truck race by Rajah Caruth. I forgot to cover that. Uh, and Carson kind of took it all in stride when they interviewed him post race, said, he probably had that one coming and moved on with it. And that's going to be key for Carson to show that maturity, to be able to move on from these things and not make so many poor decisions on the track. So, a good weekend for him, not only on the track, but also off of it. You also had you know, a guy who I thought would have been one of the top drivers in the finishing order. Sheldon Creed made a not so smart decision going for a huge pass in turns 3 and 4, taking himself out as well as causing damage to his teammate Austin Hill. Now Austin was able to recover and finish in fourth, so still a good day for Austin, but for Sheldon, it just seems like nothing can go right for him this season so far. And honestly, this incident, unlike others throughout this year, was kind of a self-inflicted shot to himself at a poor decision at a poor point in this race. Now, moving on to Sunday's Cup race, where all the headlines were, you did have William Byron come away with his third win on the season, taking full advantage of what happened between Ross Chastain and Kyle Larson, which we'll get here to in a second. Getting redemption from last year's spring Darlington race, where he was knocked out of the way by Joey Logano, gets the win. Kevin Harvick, he finished in second. Chase Elliott third. And behind these guys, there was some pretty surprising names up there in the top 10. There's some guys that kept it clean and was up there in the running for the late going of the race. You had uh, Bubba Wallace finishing in fifth. After he started in second, led a few laps. A good solid day for Bubba at Darlington. Harrison Burton, he comes away with a sixth place finish in what's been a pretty disastrous season for him so far. Started in 14th. He had a good solid day, something he really needs to have. You also had Justin Haley finishing in eighth, a good run for him in Colleague Racing. Also, Chris Buescher in 10th. Todd Gilliland finished in 11th, and Todd gets another solid finish in that 38 car. And what has truly been a career making season after, you know, basically being told he's getting moved out of the car for the full time season. So Zane Smith could get some starts. He has taken full advantage of every start he has, and not just with this 38 car. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., he finishes in 13th. And what what was a solid day for Ricky Stenhouse? Probably one of his more solid days that he's had this season, consistent wise. He finished in the top 10 in both stages and probably would have finished up in the top 10, especially with all that went on. Could have probably rattled off a top five, but he cut a tire late and was still able to come all the way up to 13th. So he had speed all weekend. He started in third. So definitely one of those what could have been weekends, but still something to keep your head up on, you know, that they showed this much speed at Darlington. Now, getting into what was the major headline of the race, because once again, it was not the race winner. It was once again Ross Chastain and another incident on the track where late in the running on a restart with 6 laps to go, you had Ross Chastain on the inside, Kyle Larson on the outside, and going into turn one on the restart, Ross, and he admitted this in his interview after getting out of the infield care center, he was trying to squeeze Larson up to the wall, getting him out of shape so that Larson couldn't use that momentum on the outside. Unfortunately, Chastain, he was just too far ahead of Larson to be pulling this move, winds up breaking himself, taking him out of the race, and as well as ending Kyle Larson's chances at the race win. And I've been a defender of Ross Chastain. I still will be. I think he's great for the sport. I think this is a driver. This personality is something fresh and something needed for NASCAR. But this one was an unnecessary move again that took a race win away from himself, his team. and they come away with a 29th place finish. And again, this led to more, you know, backlash from fans as well as Hendrick Motorsports, including crew chief Cliff Daniels, car owner Rick Hendrick, who's now speaking up. Cliff Daniels talked about on the radio afterwards or after the wreck, saying, he hopes Chevrolet's paying attention. This is the third time that Ross has taken us out. Rick Hendrick in his post race media conference says, basically, there's no need for Ross to be this aggressive. He's not going to win a championship this way. He hopes his team owner, Justin Marks, talks to him and basically said if his guys are getting wrecked, then Ross is going to end up getting wrecked. So sending a little shot to Ross and Trackhouse Racing, and looking at the comments from these guys, it just left a sour taste in my mouth. Mainly because you have Kyle Larson, who's just as aggressive of a driver, and just a little bit quieter about it, maybe, or I'm not sure. We've seen him take out several drivers, and the most notable, especially from last year, was Justin Haley at the LA Coliseum, Chase Elliott at Auto Club Speedway. He had a couple run ins last year with Chase. And even Denny Hamlin has said as much on his podcast that Larson's one of those guys who will put you in a tough situation and, basically leave you either you can let off the gas and concede the spot to him, or you'll wind up in the wall. And we saw it this year with Ryan Preece at the Bristol Dirt Race. So, I, like I said, this comment's it's just kind of like a really, you know, I get it, Ross. Yes, he was too aggressive on this deal. I agree with Rick Hendrick there. Was it a necessary move? No. If Ross would have just held his line coming off the corner as far ahead as he was, he probably would have cleared Larson, if not on the back straightaway, at least when they were running through turns 3 and 4. I think Ross just had a better car. So it definitely was not necessary for Ross to make this aggressive of a move. And as far as winning a championship this way, sure, drivers, they're keeping, a checklist in their mind. But right now, Ross Chastain's leading the points. And he's doing it by being, even though he doesn't have a race win, he's doing it by being this aggressive. So I just don't I don't see the correlation there. I don't think that much matters. Obviously, race wins would help Ross, but I mean, if he keeps this points lead, I mean, I forget how many playoff points he would get just from winning the regular season championship. But it doesn't take away from all the playoff points he's left out there on the board from these race wins. And now they're starting to, mentioning Chevrolet needs to be paying attention. I don't know what they're expecting Chevrolet to do, especially with Cliff Daniels' comments. Because I mean, Trackhouse Racing, they are. I'd probably put them as the third at the lowest priority team for Chevrolet. I, I I think the way they've come out of the gate with this next gen car has definitely put them in the spotlight with Chevrolet, right up there with Hendrick Motorsports. And Ross Chastain has been the needle mover for NASCAR this year, probably the past 2 years. He's the one that's getting all the attention, even though he isn't winning races. He's the guy everybody's talking about with his moves on the track. He was on the Pat McAfee show just this past week, which is huge exposure for the sport, huge exposure for Ross Chastain. So, I mean, I'm sorry, he's the guy with the most personality out there, I should say, and the one who's going out there and getting the attention. Whereas, honestly, these Hendrick drivers get out and they don't show a lot of personality. I mean, Chase Elliott may be the guy with the most personality on the team. So I don't see Chevrolet necessarily putting down the hammer on these guys. But going to Chastain's move, like I said, unnecessary. And you look at the restart just 8 laps earlier, where the roles were completely flip flopped. You had Larson on the inside, Chastain on the outside. Larson pulls the same move just 8 laps earlier and gets Chastain squeezed into the wall. The difference that this worked was because you had Larson completely side by side with him. Chastain was pretty much a fender away of being clear of Larson when he made this move. So I believe Chastain will get there. I think I know a lot of people don't like the whole comparison to Dale Earnhardt, But when I hear this, that he reminds drive people of Dale Earnhardt. I'm not saying he's going to be a 7-time champion. I don't see it as people saying he's going to be this, you know, legend in the sport as far as race wins or anything like that. I think he just drives with the same grit and aggression that Dale Earnhardt did. Dale Earnhardt was very aggressive, especially in the early stages of his career. And it took a little bit, but he was finally able to get to some finesse to his aggressiveness. And I think that's what's going to happen with Ross. This is just his second year in a car that can run up there up front and contend. Whereas throughout his whole career, he's really used to, middle of the pack to back of the pack cars. Say besides 1 year in the trucks with Nice Motorsports and the 1 year with Colleague Racing in the Xfinity Series. So I'm not worried about Ross's future in the sport. I think he has a team owner who's fully stands behind him. He's bringing in sponsorship and even talk of bigger sponsorship for next season. So Ross isn't going anywhere. He- He's just it's just going to take time. It's just like a rookie. You look at Joey Logano early in his career. He was looked at as this over aggressive guy who's making all these mistakes, taking out all these cars, and now he's a two-time champion of the sport. The same with Tony Stewart. The same with Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski. But eventually they got a handle on it. They were still aggressive. They still made controversial moves, but they were just being a little bit smarter about it. They knew where the line was, and that's Ross. He's just overstepping that line right now. And when he can figure that out, when he can be aggressive without taking himself out, taking anybody else out, he's going to be scary good in this Cup Series. So I know a lot of fans are hammering on him, that he ain't winning races. He's a nobody. He hasn't won a race in a year. So what? So what? To me, that means nothing because the guy, as I said, is the points leader. He's obviously running up front consistently. He may not be getting, the wins yet, but they're coming. And jumping into, with his team owner Justin Marks. Now, Justin, he has went to bat every time for Ross. And I think that's a big difference in Ross's career path for his future. And Justin came out over the past day or two saying basically they've had conversations, not necessarily some easy conversations. So they've addressed this, and Justin's trying to take a more active role, a more hands-on approach with Ross and how he's doing it. He said the important message here is that we are an obvious believer in Ross's talent. That's obvious. He's very fast, but he's got some things he's got to clean up, and that's true. I don't see this as lip service to please Chevrolet or to get Hendrick Motorsports off his back. I don't see this as him trying to rein in Ross or telling him to calm it down. I think it's just a message of, look, the speed is there and the talent is there. Ross has just got to assess these situations better. He can't just dive it off into the corner and, to heck with it, whatever happens. It's okay to finish in second. It's okay to finish in third. It's okay to come away with a fifth place car. Don't push it too hard to where now we're coming away with 30th place finishes or 23rd place finishes. You know, all the playoff points that they have left on the board from wins they should have this year is pretty high. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of Ross we get this weekend at All Star Weekend. North Wilkesboro, a short track. Do we get a little bit more subdued of a Ross Chastain, or do we get one more weekend, since it's just money on the line? One more weekend of Ross just going balls to the wall and doing what Ross does. But on the flip side of that, is this a weekend where some of these drivers finally say enough? We're going to take this opportunity to send this message that we're done dealing with it on the track. It's going to be interesting to watch this weekend, but either way, Ross, just like Kyle Larson, is going to be a huge fixture in this sport for many years to come, I feel like. So I don't get all the talk of, how he's not going to do anything or he hasn't done anything, and comparing his stats to Dale Earnhardt's at this point in their careers. It makes no sense. I know it's just people trying to get back at others saying that he's like Dale Earnhardt with his aggressiveness, but just I think the best is yet to come for Ross. He's just got to get more experience, and he's going to have to learn these lessons and learn how to be better about being aggressive. So, looking ahead to this weekend's race at North Wilkesboro, the return of this historic track, the first time the NASCAR's been back there since the mid '90s, and it is a packed full week for All Star Week. You have a lot of pro late model, super late model races going on right now. The ASA National Super Late Model Racing Series is going. You have drivers like Noah Gregson, Chase Elliott, Bubba Pollard, Suarez, Hocevar in the race, as well as young drivers like Jake Fitch, Caden Quapple, William Sawalich, Sammy Smith in this race. And this is I'm really excited to see the race this weekend. The surface is old and worn out. We're already seeing them having to do repairs throughout this week. So hopefully we're about to see some very good short track racing. Tire wear is going to be key. And this looking at back at the history at North Wilkesboro, the best I could find, or the most recent race I could find run on this track was back in 2010. And you had guys like Alex Bowman and Chase Elliott in this race. And so it's a big unknown this weekend. I tend to think with that, the veterans are going to be the stars of this weekend show. For some reason, for the Craftsman Truck Series race on Saturday, I just got a feeling I think this is going to be a good race for Stuart Friesen, where I think he will shine. But on the Cup Series side, it's hard to say. With if tire wear is going to be key, obviously Kevin Harvick, who is the king of that, he's going to be tough to beat, as well as Brad Keselowski is going to be a guy to watch to work his way up into the main event. Brad, he's like Harvick, was very good at Atlanta and their old worn out surface. I think he could be in for a strong run on Sunday night. But also keep an eye on Joey Logano. Joey Logano seems to be the king right now of winning at new tracks. He won at the first running at LA Coliseum, won the first running at Bristol Dirt. And even though this isn't a new track necessarily for NASCAR, it is a new track for a lot of these guys. And it'll be interesting to see who's able to take care of the tires the best. Is aero going to play a big part in it? What about shifting? Is it going to be like Martinsville? A lot of unknowns here, but if this goes well, hopefully we see a points paying race back at North Wilkesboro. I know this is one of the hottest tickets you could get this year for NASCAR. Obviously, it's going to be a work in progress as far as parking and all goes, but if this is a big success, well received, I wouldn't be surprised to see North Wilkesboro back possibly for a points paying race. Maybe not next year, but hopefully maybe the year after that, see them back on the schedule in a full time capacity, and we can enjoy the return of another old racetrack. And that'll wrap up this week's episode. As always, thank you for joining me and listening along. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button to this show so you know whenever our new episodes drop. Also, head on over to our YouTube channel. You can find the link in the description below. Subscribe to our channel there so you can keep up with our new videos as well as our weekly fantasy picks. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week and enjoys what is sure to be a fun weekend at North Wilkesboro. And we'll be back same time next week to go over all the action from All-Star Race Weekend.